Judges is a book of recurring cycles and God's unending compassion for his people. Over and over, we see God raising up judges or leaders to save the people. And we see this expressed fully in Judges chapter 2, verse 16. It says, "Then the Lord raised up judges who saved them out of the hand of those who plundered them." This is out of God's compassion. He raises up people. He sees his people who are weakened, who are struggling without good leadership. So if we go back a little bit, Joshua led the people into the promised land, and this is where Israel was to enter into their rest. The only thing they had to do was claim the land and drive out the Canaanites. The purpose of this would be to cleanse the land from idolatry, immorality, paganism. The problem is they didn't do it. They couldn't do it. They turned their focus from God and his promises to the world and its emptiness. Israel abandons the Lord over and over and turns to the practices of the Canaanites, adopting their entire lifestyle, and this is why they never had victory in the land. They forfeited their victory because they rejected the Lord's command, which was to drive out the people. God said, "I've given you the land. All you have to do is walk in there, claim it, and drive out the people." And the reason why God asked them to drive out the people, because he knew that the practices of the Canaanites would only cause Israel to stumble and harden their hearts. And so he commanded them to rid the land of the Canaanites, so that they could fully experience the victories that God had promised in the end. As we go through our study of Judges, it's going to become very clear that the Israelites are like us today. The Israelites in this story represent humanity's need for a savior. That doesn't change for us today either. And like the Israelites, we can fall into a pattern. And the pattern goes like this. There's disobedience, and the disobedience comes from serving God half-heartedly, from only obeying his commands halfway. And so for the Israelites, the command was to go into the land, claim it, and then rid the land of the Canaanites, to remove them completely. Well, they did the first part. They took over the land, but they didn't drive out the Canaanites completely. And as we're going to see, this was why they never fully had victory, because they only obeyed God halfway. And so there was the disobedience. That's the disobedience. And this leads to oppression. Oppression from their foreign enemies, but also for us, it's oppression from the enemy. Like the Israelites, we can fall into the pattern. And the pattern goes like this. Disobedience, or half-hearted obedience. God gives you a command and he says, "I need you to do two things." And we only do one of them, like the Israelites. God says, "You only obeyed me halfway." That's disobedience. And so now they felt oppression from foreign kingdoms, from foreign lands, from foreign rulers. They felt the oppression. And it's through this oppression that they hit rock bottom. And when you hit rock bottom, you feel like you don't have anywhere else to turn to, so that you cry out to God, and that's what the Israelites did. They cried out in their distress, and out of God's compassion and his kindness, he heard them and he saved them. And their response to being saved and rescued was faithfulness. But eventually, because they didn't completely drive out the Canaanites, there was still that disobedient heart that they held on to. And so because of their disobedience, they were pushed into oppression. And the cycle continues that way. If we don't drive out the sin in our life completely, as the Israelites didn't drive out the Canaanites completely, we begin to have this heart of disobedience. And this heart of disobedience is what leads to oppression. And this is how we follow the pattern of the Israelites in the book of Judges. So this book gives us an amazing picture of God's patience, his compassion, his forgiveness, and not just to the Israelites at this one time, at this moment in history, but it also gives us a glimpse into God's patience and his compassion, his forgiveness for us today, every day.